there one second.
White man's megaphone. Okay. Wow, what a movie.
Oh, I'm glad it still works. Isn't it amazing? A film that's 38 years old still works. You know?
I think it still works, don't you? I mean,
Miss, would you like to sit here?
in thinking about what movies, what movies would best show Gary's work, I mean, this wasn't your first film though, but it was early in your career for sure.
Well, I won the Sundance Audience Award that year in '89.
89, which was the critical year of Sundance, actually. 89 was the year that Sundance transitioned from being a small little sort of regional operation to really going national, because that year, Sex, Lies, and Videotape was there, you were there.
Yeah.
There were a number of films that really changed the game.
I did eventually work with Andy McDowell, which was interesting.
From Sex, Lies, and Videotape?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, who didn't have a crush on her when that film came out?
But it was also before the sort of moment. I mean, this was before Dances with Wolves. It was before Black Robe.
Yeah.
It was directed by a white director.
He's South African who made films vital in the apartheid regime to loosen the strength hold on all that. So he had to abort South Africa after making the film he did. So he was a very conscious guy. But I'll never forget one thing he said to me, because the Kit Fox Society, which look after the cultural integrity of the Cheyenne people up in northern Montana, central Montana. Because Jimmy Red Cloud was really Filbert, and I got turned on to him by the locations manager early, because I went a couple of weeks early. I need to do, I'm a Great Lakes Indian, I'm not a Western tribe. So I had to socialize myself to their culture, and I was really adamant about that. So I got up there a couple of weeks earlier, and James Red Cloud became my mentor. And I basically channeled James for that character, but I had done a fair, extensive work in clown to find that innocence. Because there was a teacher I had, Richard Pachenko, who was a Polish man, one of the first people to die of AIDS in my day. And he had a methodology that brought the French clown, but he used Native American in terms of the four directions and the colors, the 4 colors of the medicine wheel, which is kind of red, white, black, and yellow. And that whole thing changed my career as an actor. It really opened me up for special stuff. And then going there and realizing the culture of the Northern Cheyenne was so precious. And they were so, I think they had about 3,500 people in the community at the time. They had 600 Vietnam veterans. And so they were, all that stuff that you see in the film in terms of dealing with the sweat lodge and healing, there was so much sad situation there with all their commitment to the U.S. forces in that crazy war, which, I lost a cousin in. But it was really, that really shaped not only my professional life as an actor, but it shaped me in a spiritual way that I still hang on to.
That immersion into indigenous
Cheyenne
culture from the Cheyenne, yeah.
It's special.
There's a documentary film about the war in Vietnam that actually has a whole section on indigenous soldiers who articulated the sort of warrior ethic that led them to participate. And so indigenous young guys participated in pretty high numbers in the Vietnam War.
And, General Custer Battlefield, where he made his pass on to the next world, is about 30 miles south of the Northern Cheyenne community, so they were very much a part of that strategy to get rid of that fellow.
So this was a groundbreaking film, really. I mean, because we had not seen in the independent film world a film that was so committed to sort of an indigenous story that I'm aware of. I mean, the early American independent film scene. And of course, it wasn't until Smoke Signals, which you're also in, that there was an indigenous directed indie feature film.
That's true.
Chris Eyre, who had made some short films earlier on. And so, and there was actually, that was a moment of great expectation and hope that there would be a substantial indigenous film scene develop and would become prominent and would be a cultural force. What do you think? I mean, where are we now in relationship to all that? And of course, Sundance committed to an indigenous film section each year, which no longer exists. But you know, how did that proceed? Was that hope grounded? Where are we now?
Well, we're going backwards now. You know, you can see what he's doing to museums and stuff. I guess you all know who I'm talking about. I don't even want to mention his name, but the strategy has changed immensely, and it's got an impact on commercial television and all the players, right? They're going to back off from native content because it's not telling the stories that want to be told. Everyone does tend to toe the line, I find. But there's enough indigenous content being developed outside of mainstream. You know, we also have an indigenous section, of course, it's mentioned in the program at the Santa Fe International Film Festival, which I head up. So I'm looking at 1,000 films a season. You know, I think we've got the largest commitment of native programming this year that I've ever seen in our 17 years, because we've been Oscar qualified now, so we're the festival of the show in terms of the Southwest to get a potential nomination, but whatever that's worth. You know, I don't know.
Reservation Dogs certainly had an impact. Anybody seen Reservation Dogs here? Yeah. And of course, you're a character, a cool character in that.
Yeah. We have a new one coming called The Lowdown. I'm not in it this season, but I'll be in it next season with Sterling Hartzell, the creative guy for Res Dogs. But we had a wonderful group of writers and producers and directors. And a lot of them are coming back for this show called The Lowdown.
So Res Dogs is over, right?
Yeah.
But Lowdown is the new series.
By Sterling in particular, and some of our past directors from Res Dogs are involved, and some of the actors, and more of the actors will be involved next season. And it stars Elias. I don't know. I can't think of his name. I can never think of his name. Some great, wonderful guy. It's not a native guy.
Yeah.
So the stars are like Kyle MacLachlan and, you know, other older players out of Hollywood. I did a film with Kyle too. That's crazy. Part of my highway sequence. It was called Moonshine Highway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Gary, we're going to be showing, is it Sunday or tomorrow? I can't remember. Sunday.
Yeah.
Dead Man, Jim Jarmusch film with Johnny Depp, which Gary also stars in. And also includes Robert Mitchum, actually.
I know, Robert Mitchum's last movie.
Yeah.
I did Marlon's last movie too.
Yeah.
So that's the touch of, you know, eternal glory. He started with Gary.
I bet you're in, but you wear my teeth.
What was it like to work with Marlon Brando?
I can't say enough about the cat because Miss Piggy directed the film.
That's right. Frank Oz, who was a Muppets guy, and Brando didn't like him and called him Miss Piggy, right?
No, he said, "What do you know about making movies? I got 2 Academy Awards. All you know about is pigs." You see, Marlon wanted to be pink and gay.
Yeah.
And Frank wouldn't allow it, so Marla just punished him the rest of the film. It was pretty interesting to watch. And I had a rehearsal with Frank, and Frank said, "What would you do to intimidate somebody?" That was my direction, so I did it. And he went flying, and I caught him.
You caught Marlon Brando?
No, I caught Frank Oz, because he asked me what would you do to, I grew up the streets in Buffalo, New York, right? I mean, I was the biggest, strongest dude, so I always defended our little gang. Everybody was all ganged up. We were the magnificent bastards. And Frank took it 24 hours, but I think it was the stunt man that informed him that I had assaulted him. All I did was hit him quick in the chest, and he flew, and I went and caught him.
Frank, you did.
No, I did it to Frank, and then Frank called me the next day at the hotel, and he said, you know, I could fire you for assaulting me. And I said, well, Frank, I mean, geez, you know, you asked, I just thought I'd show you. It's very intimidating, isn't it? He goes, it sure is. I said, well, you know, if you got to fire me. It was the best, probably Hollywood. It's only one of the few Hollywood films I did, with Robert De Niro as the lead, and Edward Norton, Angela Bassett, and I was number 5. Marlon was 3. You know, we have numbers on film sets, you know, which gives you some. I used to joke with all the players, we've done the films together, that, oh, you're number 6, you get to sit in the front seat, you know. I'm number 9, I got to sit back here. But anyway, that's a fun joke among actors. But so anyway, the stuntman was the one that kind of fueled it. So there's a stunt in that film. The film's called The Score, and the guy made me do the stunt 40 times till I hurt myself. So that was my punishment. This is all before Marlon comes. So then Marlon comes, and he's got this grief. He won't let him be pink and gay, so Marlon punished him. Just punished him. He had an electronic fart machine. And Frank would beg him, please, Marlon, this is our last take for this scene. And Marlon would do it perfectly till... And I was like, yeah, get him, you know. So I was all for Marlon, man. You know, and I did the dumbest thing. I, you know, at the time we wanted to know, you know, who killed Anime Aquash from the, you know, the American Indian movement, right? And they were all in Marlon's bus. His RV had given it to Dennis Banks and Russell Means, and they were then doing this public relations tour, and Anime Aquash was ahead of them doing the public relations in the town before. So when Marlon had a sign on the door that said, do not knock, just come in. So I just thought, well, I'm number 5, you know. Walked in and said, hey, Marlon, I'm Gary Farmer, and explained, you know, Scanos Fuego, Negaso Hyands was. I'm from 6 Nations along the Grand River. Haudenosaunee, and you were with Russell and Dennis and that bus, or that was your bus. I just wondered if you knew anything about Anime Aquash and her murder. You know, and there goes the dumbest question to ask Marilyn. But he said, you know, he didn't want to talk about it.
So this film was shot in 16 millimeter, totally indie.
I think it was 30.
You think it was?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Toyomichi Kurita is a wonderful cinematographer. Shot it out of Portland or Seattle, somewhere up there. I don't know if he's still making films. He did some great films, though, if you look him up as a cinematographer. Yeah.
So what was the experience of production? How you know, you got there? This was sort of the biggest thing you'd done up to that point, yeah?
Yeah, I was a theater actor for 13 years before I did this film.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I did some Canadian, you know, I was bred in Toronto as a theater actor. And, you know, I did a lot of Canadian television before this. But when the Americans started coming up to Canada, because it was cheaper to make stuff, and they still are, despite current administration, I sounded more American than Canadians, because I grew up in Buffalo. So I scored a lot of American films, like I was in the first Police Academy and all kinds of different little stints, you know, before I did Powwow. But yeah, I was mainly a theatrical actor. Yeah.
But the experience of production was good on Powwow Highway?
Oh yeah, I mean, I had, you know, we had Dennis O'Brien, I think he's credited as the producer or executive producer. He worked for George, right? And there was
for George Harrison.
Yeah.
This film was partly produced by George Harrison. The
It was
Beatles.
totally produced by George. His company had made films. Yeah. So I got to hang out with George a little bit later on, but I'll tell you this wonderful story. So Dennis O'Brien was this Wall Street broker who didn't seem to know anything about story or film or Indians, you know. So he tried to cut a lot of what was significant, like the tokens. He tried to cut the Fort Robinson scene, you know, with that, you know, the Southern Cheyenne coming north. You know, a lot of the things that were intrinsic to the history of these people. And I had to go sit on my trailer. I said, look, I'm not going out there again until this guy backs off, you know, because this is what the story's about. And he tried to kill all that stuff. So I used to do that, a lot of resistance. I think it had a lot to do with, you know, me not having 300 credits in a way. But that's okay. You know, I really stood up for my own people, and what I learned from Northern Cheyenne affected me. It's still with me. You know, all that. I went back to Jimmy when I did Dead Man, that's why I put them in sequence. I thought it was great that you programmed both. But anyway, he backed off a bit, but he wanted to cut also my naked scene, my bare butt scene. And so Jonathan had and this is after the film is cut.
The director, Jonathan Wax, yeah.
Yeah, so he had a great idea. Let me show George
Yep.
Harrison the cut. And when my naked butt came on, George laughed. So I always say that George Harrison saved Filbert's ass. Yeah, he was cool though. George was cool, you know. He married my cousin's neighbor's daughter. That young lady that's in the castle in England is from that little town where they do all the oil and gas on the coast of south of LA.
Yeah.
Where that wonderful poet, crazy poet, was from. Can't think of his name.
So your performance in this was widely praised, and it sort of put you on the map.
Yeah.
What's it been like? I mean, you know, trying to navigate the movie business. It's hard for any actor, for sure. And there are plenty, you know, 90% of actors aren't working. So,
Especially now, yeah.
Especially now, but how would you characterize, you know, the opportunities that you've got, you know, the ability to build a working career, to sustain yourself? I mean, what's the journey been like? In what ways has it been limiting because you're Indigenous, do you think? I mean, just some thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, I always stood up. I mean, I can pass for a non-native guy, unless the sun's out. So I play, you know, a lot of different characters over the course of time, you know, but it's filmmakers like Jay Craven that have kept me alive. I think we've done 4 films together?
Yeah.
3 or 4?
3. He's in my new film that will be out next year.
Which I just love. What I always loved.
Disappearances. Gary's fabulous in Disappearances, yeah.
But you know, so it's been people like yourself that have kept Gary Farmer going and, you know, still active. I think I've got 3 or 4 films online right now. It's not major parts, but it's wonderful parts.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of them are really moving. And so I'm still gainfully employed.
Yeah.
And I do a lot of speaking like this stuff, and present at a lot of universities. And I'm also a band player. I got a band, and we play all.
He has a blues band called Gary Farmer and the Troublemakers.
I don't know how blues it is, just because I'm a harmonica player and a vocalist, but you know, I won a New Mexico Music Award for Best Americana.
That's ironic.
Do you have some questions for Gary? Yeah.
I noticed that Robbie Robertson was featured in the score quite a bit, but sort of semi-credited. I'm just curious as to why he wasn't.
Well, there's also Creedence Clearwater Revival, and the fellow who programmed the music just recently passed as well. A lot of people passed from this film. You know, Robbie actually, you know, I don't know if you know Robbie, but he was my cousin as well through marriage. He's from my community. And no one knew he was a native guy from 6 Nations. And Robbie's famous quote is, "You got to be careful who you tell." So the guy, Barry, I think his name is, did the music, scored the film. And then Robbie's album, which became, I think there's at least 3 or 4 songs from Robbie's, I forget which album it is, but it really brought him home, that film. Brought him back to us and said, where he became very involved with my community and the Woodland Cultural Center, which is it was a residential school for us, about 12 miles from the res. So he got very involved in supporting that effort, and his children came back to us as well. And my friend Derek Miller, who's a musical collaborator from my community, who's a very powerful guy, wrote a song about his daughter and stuff. It's a beautiful song. And so they're kind of tied back in, and then Robbie's death was unfortunate and fast, and we didn't know what to go, but he gave a fair share to support that cultural center, which was the old residential school, so he came home in the end.
Wonderful.
But he was always quoted as saying, you gotta be careful who you tell that you're a Native American, because you can get blackballed so easily for anything. So people like James Garner never did come clean,
Wow.
So there was a lot of, you could see the racism that still exists and is present. It's always been here in America, but now it's so obvious, it's pathetic, right? So.
Fred Ward, actor that's going to be in The Player, which we're showing here also, Robert Altman's film, was indigenous, but you never knew, and he didn't seem to play it up much.
Yeah. I did a film with Fred too called, I haven't even watching Dark Wind, the series. There's an original movie for A Few Laughs.
It's A. Martinez.
With A is in the series, yes, but Lou Diamond plays the Navajo chief in the film with Fred Ward playing leap horn, and I played Cowboy Dashie, which is anyway, I play the world's biggest Hopi deputy in that period, and it's kind of an interesting film. If you're into the series, take a look at the 1990 film made by executive produced by Robert Redford. Unfortunately, he was in love with Sonia Braga at the time, and we had a hard time keeping his attention.
There's a new this movie, Fancy Dance, that was out a couple of years ago.
That's my language in that film. Cubans, canos fuego. Hello, everybody. Is there peace in your heart?
Yes.
With
Right on.
with Lily Gladstone,
Yeah.
who also has made a splash, certainly. And it hasn't been seen much, but it's really quite a good film, Fancy Dance with Lily Gladstone.
No, it's a wonderful film.
Yeah.
And it took that director,
I'm trying to remember, but an indigenous woman indigenous director.
yeah, she's actually Seneca Cayuga from Oklahoma. We had settlements all the way down, we're at about 18 communities throughout the United States and Canada, Haudenosaunee or Iroquois. But yeah, she's doing terrific. She picked up a big Hollywood agent. She's killing it now.
Yeah.
We're trying to do a film about Mildred Bailey. You know her?
No.
Mildred Bailey was like the top 10 artists during the swing era, 1920s. She's Coeur d'Alene, like Sherman Alexie from Smoke Signals. And she was also half non-native or white mother, I think, or father. Anyway, she's the one that introduced Bing Crosby to the world. And she went and became a top 10 artist in the swing era out of New York City. And she was with the Paul Whiteman Orchestra to start. She's the one that she made Paul Whiteman Trio for real. That was her brother. Her 2 brothers and Bing Crosby. So she gave Bing Crosby his first break. And he was a bit of a miserable guy, though. But anyway, it's a beautiful story, so we're trying to develop that. And so we asked her to, if she'd be interested to do the script and stuff. So we're kind of working with her off.
Now, you also were sort of a pioneer in radio, pretty much out of college, yeah? Tell me what you did in radio.
Well, I tried to create a national radio system in Canada. We had 300 community-based stations, so I got expert at the CRTC, which is like the FCC here in the States. I'd like to do the same thing here. And so I made Aboriginal content, or that's what they called us. They change our name every 10 years. We still refer to ourselves as Indians, so because we relate to that. But so I went and got major urban centers in Canada. I had 70% of Canada by radio on, Calgary, Toronto. I had the nation's capital, Ottawa, Kitchener-Waterloo, which is by me. I had Halifax, I had Vancouver, I had Northern Vancouver, or Northern British Columbia. So I was rocking and rolling, and when I helped to establish APTN, because I had so much CRT experience, but how I did it was I got, in Canada, all the commercial stations have to give 4% of their annual budget to public good. For years, Canada just gave it to Stompin' Tom Connors to do a tour promoting him, as a Canadian artist. And I qualified native content to qualify for that 4%. And so I'd go to commercial stations in Canada and say, look, you want to support us? We'll support you to help you get your license renewed. And they'd give us 1.5 or 2% of that 4% per year. And I raised like millions of dollars to execute. I needed $55 million to put all the towers up because CBC wouldn't share it. They're very much like NPR in a way, where they think they're the only ones that can be a public network, right? And so I had to fight CBC with lawyers my whole 10 years. It was awful. And some of these public networks got bought out years ago, right? And of course, CBC is owned by the Canadian government, so.
So you were involved with programming, is that right? Were you on the air? Did you do programming? What
Well,
kind
I
of
was the
programming?
head of the whole operation, so I trained Native people to execute. But in the end, I couldn't raise the $55 million to put it across the country. Canada didn't want anything to do with it, right? They wouldn't support it that way, the Canadian government. And then the Native people, a lot of the establishment, the national organizations, got bought out by oil and gas, and they certainly didn't want an artist-run network happening. So everybody undermined me and eventually collapsed. But 5 of the 9 networks I built up got turned over to Aboriginal broadcasters, so I'm proud of that. But I got undermined because, I wanted to help Canadians understand the relationship between Native and their founding French and English. Because it was as tragic as it was here. But I wanted us to help them understand the residential school system, and that just got darker and darker the farther west it went. It's just the most sad story you can imagine. And there's so many films that reflect that, like, what's it, Imagining Native? No, Remaining Native, which is, that's a perfect example of the situation. But it got really dark as it went farther west in Canada.
Other questions people had?
Mr. Farmer, I gotta say, thanks again for being here. It's a pleasure talking to you before the screening. I believe one of the scenes that strummed my heartstrings the most and resonated with me was when Filbert has gone through his evolution of turning into whirlwind dreamer, on the sacred ground. And I mean, you really hit the performance out of the park. You weren't really performing; you were living the moment from actor to actor. So I really recognize that. So I wanted to ask you, Filbert's evolving in the whirlwind dreamer, and he's obviously like letting go of that Hershey's bar, which is pretty funny, but it's very symbolic of the transformation he's going through. As you were living through that as an actor, I don't mean to pry, my intention isn't to pry with this question, but do you feel like Gary had to let go of something himself while living through that scene, through that moment?
We all do, right? In life, we all got to give up. I just gave up sugar and I gave up gluten.
Right on.
I had to, I've been dealing with cancer, so there's all kinds of things I had to let go of, that caused me to be too heavy my whole career, so we all got to let go of things when it's time. You either live or you die, right? And And you got, it's all up to y'all, you know, it's not, it's up to us each individually, so. We continue to grow all the way till death, you know,
It's an ongoing process.
It's an ongoing
I always tell
process.
people I'm a student of life, so that makes sense.
yeah,
Appreciate that.
you bet.
You're an actor?
Yes, sir, I am.
Yeah, cool.
What about-
Are you in a film that's here?
I do. I'm in the 2 o'clock showing. It's the audio description. I had the
Uh-huh.
pleasure of doing it with
Yep.
my visually impaired friend Lee Pugsley. So
Cool.
happy to be here.
Good, great.
Happy to.
Try to come and see that.
So,
Yeah. Is it here?
it's the
2 o'clock.
The Axum.
Axon up in, on the college campus, yeah.
Fountain.
Excellent.
Yeah,
But again, really appreciate you.
you bet. Thank you for coming.
But
I just want to know, when is the Santa Fe Film Festival this year?
When's the Santa Fe Film Festival?
And it's October 15 to 20 this year, 6 days first time. I spent a lot of years in the early development of the Toronto International Film Festival. So I was a young actor then, and I never had to pay to see anything because you know, the community was so small back then. But now it's classic international film festival. So I've taken a lot of what I'd learned, both from Sundance and from the Toronto International Film Festival, and helped to shape the Santa Fe International Film Festival. So it's 17 years this year. We're really proud of it. Yeah, thank you.
I wondered if you could talk about Powwow Highway and how it became so authentic. You mentioned the producer was from South Africa, but it's like people have been living on reservations in Montana for a long time. There was no movie like that before that I know of.
No, and you know, I married the girl who wrote it. We lasted 10 years. We had to do it. In fact, I thought she might be here today. She just lives down in East Hampton, Massachusetts, where we got married and stuff. We're really still close, best of friends. She's also dealing with cancer. She still teaches writing at Emerson College. But she actually wrote my character. I guess that's why I married her. And her partner kind of wrote, you know, the AIM activist, which was played, of course, wonderfully by A. Martinez, who's still a dear friend, and we're about to embark on a film too, A and I. Something he's written that we're working on. He's also in Dark Winds on Paramount, I think, if you're streaming. But yeah, it was Jimmy that brought me, so the lead guy went deep. A was busy doing a soap opera named, I can't think of it, Santa Barbara. You know Santa Barbara Ranchers? Yeah. So he couldn't have as much time as I had to go into the community, and Jimmy, it was around Halloween time when we were preparing for this film, and Jimmy took me, so Jimmy became my guide. I went into the sweat lodge with all those veterans. In the end, I fasted in this community up on the mountain and saw stuff that you would not, you know, I won't tell you that story, it's a good one. But I learned everything from Jimmy, so I was basically channeling him as Filbert in the film, and he was Filbert in my mind. Filbert didn't have to go anything. All the spiritual knowledge he needed was right there in the community. But, you know, the story was a road movie, so so I still carry that knowledge from Jimmy, and it introduced me to that there's another world, right? Because their pictographs show that there's life. You wonder how the pyramids got built and stuff. I mean, there's another world that we don't even know about. It's getting closer to us, I think, now, but things are going so ass backwards. But so I took all that. I just, you know, I was a theater actor, so I just grounded it all out and just kept feeding it what I knew, and even that song in the river was classically something Jimmy taught me, you know. So I would, you know, we sent the script to the community because Jean was the writer. She made sure the community got it, but, you know, what do they know? We only shot 6 days in the actual community, but they didn't necessarily read it. But Jimmy took me it was at Halloween, and there's about maybe 6 communities that are, there's Lame Deer, and then there's all these, little towns or villages where people are concentrated. So it was Halloween time, so they have these powwows at Halloween, and everyone dresses up as old, the men dress up as old women, and everybody uses for their powwow outfits, they use the stuff from the plumbing, the plungers and the bathroom cleaners and stuff from the kitchen to make their powwow outfits, right? And I'll never forget one powwow, there was Muammar Gaddafi and Richard Nixon dancing together. It was the most wonderful experience of my life at powwow. And Jimmy would get me to go up in front of everybody and tell them what's going to happen in their community about this film being done and what the subject of it was. And so the very first day, we go off to South Dakota to shoot on Bear Butte, which is a sacred site for not only the Cheyenne, but the Lakota, Nakota, Dakota. And I was so proud that the dog soldiers showed up and said, "You can't shoot on our sacred site." And this South African director at the time, I'll never forget what he said. He said, if I was on Mount Sinai and a sect of Jews told me I can't shoot here, I would go ahead and shoot. And I said, well, I don't know about this, Jimmy. Jonathan, I think we should listen to what they're telling us. And when he backed down and listened, I knew that we picked up all the power, all the ancient power from those people. And you see, there was never another film that I had done anywhere where I had as much consulting power in terms of the tribal people we were involved with, because I go in and I dig in, and I get to know what's going on among the people and their history and their traditions, and then I help them understand it. But most films won't take the time to do that. And when he backed down and agreed not to shoot there, we went and shot somewhere else up in a mountain. That's when we picked up all the power that makes that film still relevant today, in my belief. Good question.
Great. Well, been very generous with your time. Gary will be around. We're going to, again, have another session after Dead Man. That'll be fun.
I'm curious, do I get a trophy or something?
We're going to buy you lunch if we can get out of here in time.
No, but do I get a trophy?
You're supposed to get a,
Black?
Teddy bear.
Anyway.
we'll give you everything we got.
Push button.
Gary is one of our honorees for this year, and yes, you will be getting.
Trophy?
We're still working on it. All right, thanks to Gary. Thank you for coming.